When veteran David Thompson walked into the Riverside County Animal Shelter, searching for a companion dog to help him cope with his PTSD, he never expected to find what appeared to be a dead German Shepherd puppy lying motionless in a back kennel scheduled for cleaning. The 8-week-old puppy looked lifeless. His tiny body was completely still, his eyes closed, with no visible sign of breathing. David had seen enough death during his military service to recognize it when it stood before him, and this puppy appeared to have lost his battle with whatever illness had brought him to the shelter's final room. But when David's instinct told him to reach into that cage and touch the puppy one last time, what happened next would shock the entire shelter staff, and prove that miracles happen when someone refuses to give up on a life the world has written off. The puppy, believed to be gone, suddenly opened his eyes, took his first real breath in hours, and began a recovery so extraordinary that it would challenge everything veterinarians thought they knew about canine survival instincts. This is the incredible true story of Ranger, the puppy who came back from the edge of death, and David, the man whose touch brought him back to life when hope seemed impossible. David Thompson had avoided the animal shelter for months, ever since his therapist first suggested that adopting a dog might help with his combat-related PTSD. But on a gray November morning in 2023, loneliness finally overcame his reluctance to form new attachments. The 34-year-old Army veteran had been struggling with isolation and depression since returning from his third deployment in Afghanistan. His counselor believed that caring for a rescue animal might give him purpose, while providing the emotional support he desperately needed. "I wasn't looking for anything specific," David later explained to reporters. "I just knew I needed something to take care of, something that needed me as much as I needed it. I'd been feeling pretty useless since coming home, and maybe helping a dog would help me remember how to help myself." The Riverside County Animal Shelter was overcrowded, understaffed, and facing the heartbreaking reality that most municipal shelters across America face every day: too many animals and not enough resources to save them all. David walked through rows of kennels filled with dogs of every size and breed, each one hoping for a second chance, though statistics suggested most of them would never get one. "The barking was overwhelming at first," David recalled. "But after a few minutes, I started to hear each individual voice instead of just noise. Every dog was trying to tell me their story, trying to convince me they were the one I should take home." He had nearly finished walking through the adoption area when a quieter section caught his attention. It was marked medical hold, kennels reserved for animals too sick for general adoption but not yet beyond hope. Something pulled him toward that section. "I probably shouldn't have gone back there," David admitted. "But I heard this sound, or maybe it was the absence of sound that made me curious." Most of the kennels were noisy, but there was one cage in the back corner that was completely silent. Inside kennel number 47, David found a sight that would haunt him for weeks. A tiny German Shepherd puppy, no more than 8 weeks old, lay motionless on a thin blanket. His body was still, his eyes shut, and there was no sign of life. "My first thought was that someone had forgotten to remove a puppy that had died," David explained. "He was so small and so still. I was sure he was gone. I've seen enough death to recognize it. And this puppy looked exactly like the dead animals I'd encountered during deployment." The kennel card identified the puppy as Ranger and listed his condition as severe respiratory distress. A note revealed he had been unresponsive to treatment for over 48 hours. He had been surrendered by owners who couldn't afford emergency veterinary care and had been deemed too sick for adoption since his arrival. David stood outside the kennel for several minutes, staring at the tiny motionless form, fighting back memories of loss and helplessness burned into his mind by war. Everything about the scene suggested Ranger had lost his battle. "I should have walked away," David reflected months later. "Every rational part of my brain was telling me this puppy was dead. But something, call it instinct, call it denial, call it whatever you want, made me feel like I had to reach in and touch him one more time." That single decision would prove that sometimes, the most important moments in life happen when we act on instinct rather than logic. And that miracles often begin when someone refuses to believe hope is gone. The moment David's hand touched Ranger's still body became one of the most extraordinary events ever witnessed at the Riverside County Animal Shelter. "I reached into the kennel, expecting to feel a cold, stiff body," David later said. "But when my hand touched Ranger's chest, I felt something that made me freeze, the faintest hint of warmth. It was barely perceptible, but it was there." His military training kicked in. He pressed gently against the puppy's chest where a heartbeat should be. At first, nothing. Then, so faintly he almost missed it, a beat. It was like one beat every 5 or 6 seconds, David recalled. So slow and weak you'd miss it completely unless you were really concentrating. But it was there. This puppy was alive. Barely, but alive. Instead of running for help, David did what his instincts told him to. He began stroking the puppy's chest gently and speaking in the calm, steady voice he used to comfort wounded soldiers in combat. I told him I was there. That he wasn't alone anymore. That he needed to fight a little harder, David said. I don't know why I did that instead of yelling for help, but something told me he needed to know someone cared first. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Ranger's breathing began to pick up. His heart rate steadied. Then, his eyelids fluttered. When his eyes started to open, I thought I was hallucinating, David admitted. This puppy had looked completely dead when I found him, and now he was looking at me. It was like watching someone come back from another world. A shelter volunteer, Maria Santos, entered the room and froze at the sight before her. I found this man holding a puppy that we all thought had died hours earlier, she later reported. The puppy was actually looking at him and trying to lift his head. I ran to get Dr. Patterson immediately, because no one would believe what I was seeing. Dr. Jennifer Patterson, the shelter's consulting veterinarian, arrived within minutes to find David still holding Ranger, who was now showing signs of consciousness. Her examination revealed the truth. Ranger had been in a state so close to death that his vital signs were nearly undetectable. Severe hypothermia and hypoglycemia had pushed his body into a hibernation-like state. David's touch and voice had provided just enough stimulation to pull him back. The medical explanation was complex, Dr. Patterson said, but the emotional impact was simple. A dying puppy had responded to human compassion in ways that defied medical expectations. For David, it was more than medicine. Holding that puppy, feeling him come back to life, gave him something he hadn't felt in years, purpose. I felt useful again, needed again. It was like we were both coming back to life at the same time, he reflected. From that day forward, their survival was bound together. Ranger's fragile body would require round-the-clock care, feeding every 2 hours, medication every 4, and constant monitoring. For most people, it would have been overwhelming, but for a veteran trained in battlefield medicine, desperate for meaning, it became his mission. Ranger fought his way back when I touched him, David said. The least I can do is fight to keep him alive. And so, the soldier and the puppy began their fight together, 2 survivors, saving each other one heartbeat at a time. Skills David once used to save fellow soldiers would now be used to save a puppy who had somehow found him at exactly the right moment. Taking care of Ranger gave me the same sense of mission I'd had in Afghanistan, David explained to his therapist. I had someone depending on me for survival, and that responsibility helped me focus on something other than my own problems for the first time in months. Ranger's response to David's care was remarkable from the very beginning. The puppy seemed to understand that this human represented safety and survival. He would become anxious whenever David left the room, even for just a few minutes. What surprised Patterson most was how quickly Ranger recovered. Most puppies in his condition take weeks to show real improvement, the veterinarian observed, but Ranger gained weight, became active, and showed his personality within days of being with David. The bond they formed was healing both of them. David's daily routine became fully structured around Ranger's needs. Every 2 hours, day and night, he fed him specially formulated nutrition supplements. Every 4 hours, with the precision of a soldier, he administered medications, and in between, he gave Ranger the warmth, stimulation, and social interaction a young puppy needs to grow strong. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a time since deployment, David admitted, but somehow, getting up to care for Ranger felt different than lying awake with insomnia. I was getting up for a purpose, and that made all the difference. The transformation in both man and dog was obvious to everyone. David's depression and isolation lifted as he focused on Ranger's recovery, while Ranger blossomed into a playful, confident pup despite his traumatic beginning. It was like he understood he had been given a second chance, David said, and he was determined to make the most of it. The most significant breakthrough came in Ranger's 3rd week of recovery, when he was finally strong enough for his first full veterinary examination. Dr. Patterson's findings would not only measure how far Ranger had come, but also shed light on his heartbreaking past. This puppy wasn't just sick when he arrived, Dr. Patterson explained to David. He was showing clear signs of severe emotional trauma. He was separated from his mother far too early, probably at 4 or 5 weeks. Instead of the recommended 8 to 10, he was also isolated during key developmental stages, leaving him under-socialized and highly anxious. Then came the words that struck David hardest. His attachment to you is so intense because you're the first stable, nurturing presence he's ever had. You didn't just save his life, David. You saved his ability to trust. David realized in that moment how deeply their wounds mirrored each other. Ranger's hypervigilance, startle responses, and fierce attachment were canine versions of David's own PTSD. You and Ranger both understand what it's like to fight for survival, Dr. Patterson told him. That's why your bond formed so quickly. You recognize each other's trauma, and you've been healing together. The same skills that had carried David through combat, discipline, patience, and structure, had created the perfect environment for a traumatized puppy to recover. Ranger's healing, in turn, was pulling David out of his own darkness. Taking care of Ranger has given you purpose, routine, and emotional connection, Dr. Patterson explained. These are the very things PTSD treatment tries to restore. In many ways, Ranger has been your therapy dog since the moment you found him. David reflected. I thought I was saving his life, but he was saving mine, too. We both needed someone who understood what it was like to fight just to survive another day. When David signed Ranger's adoption paperwork, it wasn't just legal, it was recognition of a bond forged in survival and healing. Ranger chose you as much as you chose him, Dr. Patterson said. That moment in the kennel when he reached toward you, that wasn't medical intervention, that was recognition. He knew he was safe. 6 months later, Ranger had grown into a magnificent 45-pound German Shepherd with bright eyes, a glossy coat, and the confidence of a dog who knew he was loved. David, too, had transformed. The withdrawn, isolated veteran had become an advocate for animal rescue and PTSD awareness, sharing their story to help others. Ranger didn't just recover, David told audiences at veteran centers across the country. He taught me that healing is possible, even when you feel too broken. If a puppy who looked dead could come back to life, then maybe I could, too. Ranger was now David's certified therapy dog, accompanying him to counseling sessions, support groups, and speaking events. He seemed to sense when David was struggling, leaning against him to provide comfort, or distracting him with play at just the right moment. It's like he remembers what it felt like to need saving, David said, and he wants to return the favor. Dr. Patterson documented their case for medical journals, writing, David and Ranger's bond demonstrates the profound healing that can occur when trauma survivors care for each other. Their mutual rescue created a therapeutic relationship that traditional treatment alone could not achieve. Inspired, David founded the Second Chance Veterans Program, pairing shelter animals with veterans struggling with PTSD. Every veteran who walks into a shelter might be meeting their healing partner, David explained. These animals need us, but we need them just as much. Ranger became the program's living symbol of second chances. At events, veterans looked at him and saw a survivor. If this dog could come back from the edge of death, David said, then maybe they can come back from the edge of despair. Today, David and Ranger work side by side, visiting hospitals, supporting veterans, and spreading hope. Every morning when I wake up and see him healthy and happy, I remember that miracles happen when we refuse to give up. David reflected. I thought I was reaching into that kennel to say goodbye to a dead puppy. Instead, I was reaching toward my own second chance at life. Their journey proves that healing happens when broken souls refuse to give up on each other. The most fragile lives often carry the most love, and sometimes, touching a life that seems beyond hope is the very moment our own begins again.
If this tale moved you, if you felt the tension, the heartbreak, and the triumph, please support our channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more thrilling, emotional, and inspiring stories your way. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think. Do you believe dogs have an extraordinary sixth sense? Share your thoughts and personal stories with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.